Hi YouTube, I'm Ali, welcome back to the channel. As a trained judge of Mega City 1, it's time for me to grab my badge and lawgiver, head out of the city walls and catch me a perp, because today I'm reviewing Judge Dredd, The Cursed Earth. I am the law. I'm not the law. I may or may not be the law. Now, as always, the aim of this review is to see if this game is a good fit for you and your gaming group. So I'm going to be looking at both the contents of the box, an example of setup of play. We're going to be talking about the mechanics and the description that make up the game, and then I'm going to finish off with a summary. But right now, we're going to start with a simple review of the premise. What exactly is this game about? This game, at its heart, is a chase game. We're trying to track down and chase a guy called Max Normal through a wilderness called the Cursed Earth, which surrounds Mega City 1. Now, the Cursed Earth is full of radiation. It's got horrible beasties and dinosaurs and all kinds of nasties in there. Max Normal has escaped. He's running ahead of us, and we're trying to track him down. Now, there are three ways of playing this game. You can either play as a solo player. You're doing the tracking on your own, and it's you against the game. Or you can play as a cooperative, that is, everyone who plays as the judges and tries to track down Max Normal. Or you can play as two teams. One group are the judges trying to track down Max Normal, and I like saying Max Normal, don't I? And the other team will play a group of baddies who are also trying to track down Max Normal, but are trying to compete against the judges to get there first. All in all, pretty good setup. So this is the box game. This is Judge Dredd, The Cursed Earth. This is what you get. This is the size of it. It's not particularly big, which is great, because you know I like small boxes. And what I really like about small boxes is when they open up like books, which is exactly what this does. So you can see there's a hinge here, and it opens up. Inside you get an instruction booklet, which describes all the components you get as well. There's not a huge amount to it, but everything in there is well explained, which is perfect. There are three variations of this game, like I think I mentioned later on, which is a solo play, a team play, and then a cooperative play. The rules for all three obviously are described within that box there. I'm going to move this over a bit so we keep it in frame. There we go. Now, let's start with the actual cards that you get. Now, all of these cards are oversized, which is great. But they're not so big as to be difficult to play and hold. The first three I'm going to turn over are the characters you're going to be playing, which are the judges. So that's Judge Anderson, Judge Giant, and Judge Dredd. Each of them have a specialization, which is why they're part of this game. So this is about Judge Dredd is all about survivability. Judge Giant is diplomacy, and Judge Anderson obviously has psionic powers. Now, these 16 cards represent the Cursed Earth, a wilderness that has multiple different kind of locations. The cards, again, are beautifully drawn out. They're all named, and then they have a little bit of comic writing there, which describes special rules that you may need to adhere to when you turn over these cards. The last three cards in the game will always contain Max Normal, the guy you're after, and when you turn this card over, you'll see that it's the end of the game. Love the iconography on this, love the pictures. Really well done. Very hostile place though. Now, if you're playing against another team, then you'll be using these cards, which are the second team, the baddie, so to speak. That's Mean Machine, Orlok's satellite called Satellite, and the Disciple. These guys are trying to get Max Normal ahead of the judges, and in fact, they start one step ahead. But similar skill sets, different characters, really. Okay, that's that. I'm going to just jump onto the actual cards you use to play the game. So these are your player cards. These stay in your hand, and then you play them out in a particular order to see what happens. These, again, oversized cards, really well drawn out. That comic feel coming through all the time there. You have different kinds of actions described on the card, some of which you have to do, some of which you can choose to do, some of which give you a choice of what you want to do. There's a number given indicating an order in which they must be played if they're played during the day. Let's just move this so you can see them. There we go. Again, I really enjoyed the graphics on here. They were really nice. Most of these cards don't help you. They are actually they're built and designed to hinder you. So you've got to be pretty specific and careful in how you play them. But again, beautifully drawn out. So that's my player cards. Now in the middle, I'll put those meeples aside for a second. In the middle, you get this little box. Which I thought was a really nice addition. They could have given you a plastic bag, as so many games do, but you get a little box, and that's to carry all your chits and bits and pieces there. So there's a bunch of tokens in there for health, for ammunition, for rations. There's a marker for whether it's dawn or dusk, which affects play and tells you what needs to happen. So at dawn, you've got to take a ration. At dusk, you've got to take a ration, and the enemy moves forward one. Really well done. That I really enjoyed that little box there. And you also get 2 meeples, which should be in that box, but they represent, one group represents you guys, the judges, as you chase, and the other meeple represents the bad guys who are also chasing Max Noble and who usually start ahead of you. Well, they always start ahead of you. Tell you what, I'm going to sneak them in there. There we go. When it's all done and dusted, it all fits together quite well. Don't know why I'm showing you this, but there we go. It shuts together and it's nice and compact. There we go. That's the box. So here we are set up for a 3-player game. I'm not going to share the cards for the other 2 players, but I will share my cards. The way this is set up, we're already mid-game, or near the end of the game actually. This black token represents these 3 judges. This is us playing together cooperatively. This grey token represents Mean Machine and his gang. He is 1 step away from the last 3 cards, it would appear. There we go, the last 3 cards. So Max Normal's in those 3 there somewhere, and the game could end next turn because he's automatically shuffled into the last 3 cards of the deck. We've already burnt through a number of other cards as represented by this stack here. But you can see that Mean Machine is 1 ahead of us at the moment. We need to catch him up and in fact overtake him to get there as quickly as possible. This area here will represent the playing area. We're going to lay cards down in a particular order and play through them before we can move on. And we do that during a day activity. A day is marked by this token here. It starts at dawn when we give up 1 food item, and it ends at dusk when we give up another food item and Mean Machine moves forward 1. That meeple, like I said, represented 3 judges. Our judges have already been in the wars. Judge Anderson is on 4 out of the 5 health she started with, and she has taken on a radiation token. If she has more radiation, or if any of them have more radiation than they have health, they die, and they are turned over and out of the game. Judge Giant's faring a little less well. He's only got 3 health left, and that's probably because some of the encounters that have happened means he's lost health. He's got 2 radiations. We can take another 2 radiations before he dies. If we take an equal amount, he's still okay. Judge Dredd, he's a star. He hasn't taken any damage, or he's incredibly lazy. The judges between them have 4 bullets that they can use. These blue tokens are regarded as bullets, and they can be used to get out of various actions. And they have 1 item of food left, which they need to restock as soon as possible because it requires 2 per day. This token here represents the chief judge. It's merely a starting marker indicating who goes first. This is the draw pile. We draw up to 4 cards if we're in a 2 to 4 player game. No, in a 3 to 4 player game. If you're in a 2 player game, you take 6 cards. This is the discard pile. Each round consists of, if we've just arrived at this location, you make sure this shows dawn, you give up a food token, and then you play, each player plays a card. I'm going to just pretend to play this card here, and I'll explain myself in just a minute. Then the next player will play a card, then the third player will play a card, then it's me to play again. Let's say I play this card, and so on and so forth until we have 6 cards in front. There we go. Just on the table there, 6 cards in front. Now, during the dawn, we can rearrange these to be in numerical order. starting with the lowest number at one end and going up to the highest number. This gives us the order in which they're played as well. So let me just quickly rearrange these to go like that. There we go. So when we play the events of the day, which are occurring now, we will start here and move forward. Now, each of these cards has 3 different coloured blocks on them. They have a yellow, a blue, or a red. Yellow is compulsory and has to be carried out. Blue is optional. You don't have to do them at all. You can choose to do them, and usually there is a benefit in doing so. Red has to be carried out, but you're always given a choice of at least 2 blocks. You can either do the top or the bottom, one or the other. And again, I would say red generally seems to be more positive than negative. Yellows are always negative as far as I've seen anyway. Oh, I've just seen that card and that may not be true. Okay, so those are our cards laid out in order. Let's go through and see what happens in this particular adventure or this particular investigation. We check the base card. There's no writing on it, so we don't have to do anything because of the card. When we move on to this card, there is some writing, and it says at the beginning of the day, or beginning of every investigation, which is the day, gain a food back. So it's kind of useful maybe to be there for as long as we can. Though in reality, no doubt these guys will move on. And so we can't stay there for too long. So the first activity is to go through number 3, which is located here. This is called the Farmhouse. Now the Farmhouse has this weird character on it. She seems to be very welcoming, but she's a mutant, a mutie. We're going to take some radiation. That's the very first thing that happens. We have to take a token of radiation. We can choose which player is going to take it, and I'm going to decide as Judge Dredd to take it. The next thing we have to do is we gain a food item. Anything with a black circle around it means we lose it. Anything without a black circle means we gain it. So in this instance, we've gained an article of food. And that makes sense. We're in the food house. It's mutated as hell, but we managed to gain some food. Now we have an option here of skipping the next card, which is what that represents. Now again, all of these tokens, I should bring this up so you can see. There we go. So that was radiation, followed by a food canister. Here we've got the option of skipping a card, jumping over the next card. But if we do that, the black circle with the man running means that our Mean Machine gang will move forward 1 card. So do we want to risk that? Well, I'm going to suggest as a playing group, we aren't going to do that. So let's pretend we've not done that. We can turn that card over or discard it because it's now been done, but we'll turn it over for now. Now, just before I move on to the next card, I'm going to draw your attention back to the symbols on the judge cards themselves. These grey ones here, these represent expertise. So Judge Anderson is a psionic judge. Her expertise is in psi activity, and she's the only one that can do psionic activity. I'll explain what that means in just a sec. Judge Giant has got diplomacy, which is the exclamation mark and the question mark in a speech bubble, and Judge Dredd has survival, which is a mountain. Occasionally we're going to come across cards like this one, which require in this case, diplomacy expertise. Now, the way you resolve those is there are 3 things you can do. Either you can go to your character that has that expertise and give up 1 health. So Judge Giant would give up a health and he would then resolve that expertise issue. Or you could go to one of your other characters and give up 2 health. And that's because they aren't experts in that particular field, but they're doing the best they can. The third thing you can do, I overemphasized the word third there, didn't I? The third thing you can do is you may have a card, and you'll pick these up as you play the game, that will sit with these judges that allow for expertise. Here's an example, in fact. The very next action, if we did this action, it shows that there's a psionic requirement, so I have to do something psionic. But if I do that, I get this mountain without a black circle. What that would mean is I would actually keep that card with my team here. So I'd put it next to it, or I'd keep it underneath somewhere. And next time I'm required to make a expertise check, which is in fact the very next card I have in my row here. Here, I need to make an expertise check. Instead of taking damage, I can actually just give up that card. So it's sometimes advantageous to collect cards to be able to use them later on. Now, I touched upon psionic. Psionic is the only skill or expertise that works slightly differently. If you remember, with diplomacy and survival, if one of these two judges aren't around, and if I don't have cards, Judge Anderson could potentially do that activity and resolve it by taking 2 hits. When it comes to psionics, the only one that can resolve psionics is Judge Anderson. She has to take the hit. If she can't take the hit, then there are some rules applied depending on how many people are playing, but usually it involves adding 1 card to the end, which is what I've done here. I did that during a cut. You didn't see that, but that's what I've done. There we go. Okay, so the rest of the game just takes place by resolving each of these components. So I'll be resolving a card as I go through, and once I've resolved all of them, I'd be moving my characters in some cases. I might be skipping over certain cards. I might be removing cards from the end of the row. Whatever it takes, I resolve them all. I then get rid of them, and we're into dusk. Now, during dusk, 2 things happen, which is that I use up another food item, which I get rid of, and the mean machine move 1 more along the chain and reveal the next card. And I shuffle these along to make space for them. Remember, the writing below only affects the player characters, the judges, not the mean machine. And that largely is the game. You need to get to this pile as quickly as possible by making some very tough choices along the way. There's a lot of interaction, a lot of discussion that takes place during the gameplay as to what should be done, and it is a bloody hard game to resolve, if I'm honest. We won once after playing 4 or 5 times, I would say. Not an easy game, but a lot of fun. In terms of theme, I think this game fitted it really well. This game felt like a chase. We were always, for a long while when we played, we were always 1 step behind the bad guys who were trying to track down Max Normal, and it was a constant battle to work out whether we should sacrifice a judge or a judge's health to be able to creep forward, or let the perps escape, or let the bad guys run forward and get to Max Normal before us. So that felt really, really good. It was a different kind of feeling of urgency that you normally get on a cooperative game, I felt anyway. And the second bit about the theme is it was greatly helped by the artwork from Dan Cornwell and Rufus Dayglow, names which, if you're a fan of 2000 AD, you should be familiar with because they're artists from that comic. This was such a good piece of artwork on the cards themselves and on the instruction book. There was a nice 2-page, in fact, let me just grab it. There's a nice 2-page comic which actually describes the setup and how Max Normal is escaping and why we're after him. It's really well done, I think. I am a fanboy though, so take that with a small pinch of salt. So on to description then, and starting with audience, I would say this is very much a family game. There's nothing taboo in this game at all, so there's no adult themes that should stop children playing it, but neither should it be played by very young children, squarely aimed at family. In terms of players, we played this both with 2 players and with 4 players, and actually I didn't notice a difference. I had more fun with the 4-player game simply because there was more interaction, there was more conversation as to what could happen and what should happen. So I would probably recommend playing with 4 players if you have them, but honestly you can play this with 2 players, and there's even a solo play version in there as well, which I didn't try out, but I would play with either any number you've got up to 4. There we go. For duration, both our 2-player and our 4-player games took about 40 minutes to play. I think the box says between 30 and 50, so we were bang on the money there, I think, at 40 minutes. For the type of game, I'm going to say it's a card game. The cards were very predominant. There is no board. Could you play this while traveling? I think you could. You have a couple of little fiddly bits with the chits that you put onto the judges, like the health, the radiation symbols. They might sort of be knocked about if you're traveling on a train or something. But generally, I think you should be able to get away with playing this on a train. It's quite a small, compact area of play. In terms of depth, right, complexity and depth, It took us about a minute and a half to read the book, and that's probably down to me because I was fanboying over the comics and such like and just loving every single thing I read. And to explain it to someone, it took less than a minute to explain, more or less took less than a minute to explain. Actually, when we played the game, there were some elements that required further explanation, like exactly what was compulsory to do, what had to be done, what choices we should be making. So with all that in account, I'm going to say that actually this is kind of a standard complexity of game. It wasn't particularly heavy and deep, and it wasn't particularly super light. So it's in the middle is what I'm going to call this. Skill versus luck. Now, the thing about the skill versus luck piece is, on paper, or when I first looked at it, I thought, well, I get a random choice of cards, and then I have to use some skill to determine which order they're played. But actually, it felt that there was more randomness than there was skill. And we're going to come on to this at the end when I do my summary about whether this was what I would call a good game. I felt there was much more luck than there was skill in this game. So I'm going to base my value on about 60% luck and about 40% of skill. For the purposes of the last two elements here, which was interactions and whether this was team or single play, we played as a cooperative game, so I'm going to call it a cooperative interaction, and I'm going to call it a team-based. Though there are other elements, of course. Like I said, you can play as two teams against each other, or you can play as a solo play. But I'm going to call it cooperative and team-based. In terms of mechanics, I think there's only really two that I could talk about here. One is resource management. Your judges had a bunch of radiation chips on them. It had health and ammunition and rations, which you had to sort of carefully balance throughout the game. So there was definitely an element of resource management. But I also think there was an element of push your luck, which was basically, do you take on more damage? Do you willingly give up the death of, or allow the death of one of your judges to be able to creep forward and catch up with the bad guys and win the game? Yeah, those are my two. So in summary, did I like the game? Would I play it again, and would I recommend it? Did I like the game? In short, yes, I did. That's partly because it's 2000 AD themed and Judge Dredd themed, and I'm a huge fan of that, so I was going to like it no matter what, I think. In terms of the mechanics of the game and the way the game played out, this game is based, as I understand it, on a game called The Lost Expedition, which plays out in a very similar manner. This has got a few extra tweaks, largely because of the introduction of the side judge, which I think changes the rules a bit. But in terms of a mechanism to play a cooperative game, I really enjoyed it. I did think it was different to how the normal sort of Pandemic or Lost Island, Forbidden Island, kind of games, or Castle Panic kind of games I've played before. And this did feel like a chase, so I kind of liked that element. Would I play it again? I'm not a huge fan of cooperative games or team-based games, but I do play with people who are, and so because of that, I would absolutely play it again. Would I recommend it? Yeah, I think the price point on this is quite low. It's not a very expensive game. It's quick to play. It comes in a nice compact sort of box that you can carry with you and take along to a game club or on travels. I would definitely play it again, and I would recommend it as a game to play. In terms of my 5 questions of whether this made up a good game, let's go through those now and see whether it fulfills any of that criteria. So I did debate a little about whether or not I really did take any meaningful decisions here. I felt what I was doing was reacting to what I had in front of me. So I wasn't planning anything. I was merely reacting to a set of circumstances. And so, yes, I could say I did succeed in making meaningful decisions, but they weren't planning ahead to build an engine or find a route through the game. It was very much, oh, damn, this has happened. I better do this, this, and this. In terms of paths to victory, there was no separate path to victory. We were playing as one, and the only way we could do this was to play our cards wisely in the right order. Again, that was largely luck-based because the order of the cards were predetermined by the time of day or the cards that had been dealt to us. So, were there multiple victory conditions here? No, there weren't. There was only one way of winning the game, and that was just to play it as it was described. Skill versus luck, I've touched upon this again, and in fact, I'm now considering whether or not I want to be including it in both sections. I felt this was more
luck-based than it was skill. I think even if we played a perfect game, the way the cards landed to us meant we were always going to fail in some circumstances, and we were always going to win in other circumstances. More fail than win, probably, but I didn't feel that we were the ones reconstructing everything and reorganizing everything such that we would definitely win. More luck than skill in this game. Was I engaged? Yeah, I was definitely engaged. I did feel that every time I got a hand, I was worrying about what I needed to do. We were talking all the time as players to each other to see what was going on. I definitely felt engaged in this game. And finally, the iconography and text. Was it clear? Yes, I don't think there were any unanswered questions when it came to the rules. Usually there's something that we have to go look up. I don't think we had to look anything up for the Cursed Earth. I think it was very obvious. The only thing I would say is the chits that you get, that you put onto your characters, the ones that with radiation and food and such, they weren't very thick cardboard. A little thicker on the cardboard would have been ideal, or even better plastic or wood or something would have been perfect. They were quite thin and a bit flimsy on the version I had. But the actual graphics, I've said before, I love the artwork on there. I love the big oversized cards. So overall, I'm quite happy with it. And that's me done. That's my summary. I think I've said yes to all of those 5 questions except one, which was the paths to victory. So not a bad game on that merit there. I think it is a good game. It's not the perfect game for me, and because it's cooperative, I probably won't go out of my way to play it with my family at least. But if we have friends around who I know do like playing cooperative games, it's probably going to be picked up a few times. Now, with all that said and done, if you've enjoyed the vid, please consider subscribing or giving me a like. But until next time, guys, take care. Whew. Normal. Max Normal. That's a weird name now, isn't it? And I probably did use it too many times. What you gonna do?